Well, welcome to the Arc of Ohio podcast with Josh and Lindsay. Lindsay is here. Well, how are you doing, Lindsay?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. We continue to do this really cool thing where we are talking to people from the Arc of the United States. And today is no different. So, Lindsay, who do we have as a special guest here today?
Today we have Robyn from the national office. Robyn does a lot of education and women's health, and I am so excited. This was the podcast or the person I wanted to interview the most. Robyn, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, and thank you so much for having me. I was so excited to be on. So I'm Robyn Linscott, a public policy manager at the ARC of the US. I handle predominantly our education, childcare, child welfare, some maternal health issues. So mostly kind of child-centric things.
Cool.
I was born and raised in New Jersey, kind of before transitioning into this policy life. I was a special education teacher for 8 years in New York City. And then I left the classroom. I think I continued to feel a little bit frustrated that so much policy, especially education policy, wasn't always thinking about students with disabilities at the forefront. They were kind of thinking about them as an afterthought. And I moved to DC, and I was lucky enough to be able to join a fellowship program that placed me in the office of then Senator Kamala Harris. I worked with her as both a fellow, and then was hired in her office and worked on education and disability policy. And then I was able to join the ARC.
Awesome. Wonderful. So going from working with Kamala Harris to the ARC, how did you do that? How did you get involved? How did you hear about the ARC, or how did this all happen?
Yeah, so I've actually known about the ARC for many, many years. I am a sibling. My brother is autistic, and he was in ARC programs when he was younger. Shout out to the ARC of New Jersey and the ARC of Hunterdon County. Yeah. So my brother was in after school and summer camp programs when he was younger. And so that was kind of my first introduction to the ARC. And while I was in then Senator Kamala Harris's office, I had the opportunity to work with Bethany Lilly and also former ARC staffer Nicole Jorwick on some policy issues. And so, I was able to connect with them. And so it was, I heard that they were looking for a policy person with a focus on education and child welfare, which just really seemed like such a perfect fit. So I've been so lucky to be with the ARC for a little over a year now.
Yeah. And some of the different people that we've interviewed from the ARC of the United States, we asked that question, how'd you get involved with the ARC? We continually hear where they're like, oh, I've known about the ARC for a while, and it's amazing. The reputation for the ARC of the United States is quite strong. It's pretty cool because it's people saying, I finally got a chance. Like I saw that was an opening, and I'm like, oh, I would love to go join in what they're doing and join in that mission. So that is cool. It's good.
Yeah, it's really great to, I think, having worked on the Hill and seeing the reputation and the the value that people hold in the ARC. And I think part of that is because of our incredible chapter network, right? Our 600 state and local chapters, I think, make it such a valuable, a valuable organization, because it's an organization that is able to connect with people on the ground everywhere across the country. It's not just a DC-based policy shop, right? It is real people and real families. And I think that makes it just, such a unique and wonderful organization.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What projects are you currently working on?
Yeah, so there's quite a few things going on in kind of our space. I'd say the kind of biggest one right now is there is a center in Massachusetts that uses electroshock therapy as behavior modification for people with disabilities. And it's been going on for over 40 years. And the ARC has been, played an integral role in trying to get this abusive practice to stop. And so we have actually had some really wonderful movement on that. There is a bill that actually addresses FDA user fees, which is not normally something that the ARC would be involved in. But within this bill, there was an amendment to ban the use of this device. And so we have been working really, really hard. This bill has fully passed the House. It has passed out of committee in the Senate, and now they're kind of they're conferencing. So they're kind of trying to bring the differences in the House and the Senate bill together. So I've been spending a lot of my time meeting with different offices and working on that. And then we have kind of the ongoing school climate topics that I'm constantly working on. So a lot of issues around restraint and seclusion and exclusionary discipline. We're waiting for the Department of Education at any moment to drop a new package of discipline guidance, which would kind of lay out, a broader set of, not laws, right? It's guidance, it's best practices, it's frequently asked questions, but we've been really anticipating that. It's been many, many years since we've had the Department of Education address discipline. And we've also been working on kind of some more nitty gritty things when it comes to functional behavioral assessments and how those, kind of how those should be used in schools and versus kind of how they are being used right now, and how can we create policy that makes them work most effectively for, all children with disabilities. And I think the ongoing project that will never end is trying to get more funding and fully fund IDEA, special education funding. Yes. So that is the ongoing, that is all day, all the time. So
24/7.
24/7, it is the IDEA funding push.
Yes.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Wonderful. So we want our families to help. We want them to get involved and help, not just with their local, but their state, but even the federal side, and help the ARC of the United States. And I would say, and Lindsay would agree with it, that the ARC of Ohio in the last 5, maybe up to 7 years has continually grown. Its impact is growing. Its strength and its reputation is growing. The amount of families that we are connecting through parent support groups and different things, empowering them to give their testimony and all these things, it keeps, year by year, by leaps and bounds. Amazing, amazing things. So essentially what we've been doing is gathering families together and giving them a voice and trying to show them where their voice is needed and different things. So, and just helping them to get involved in various things. So when it comes to you, Robyn, and the projects that you're working on, how can Ohioans get involved with some of those projects?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking. So I think there are 2 places right now where Ohioans' voice would be really helpful. The first is that the ARC does have an action alert to tell your senators to support this amendment that would ban the use of electroshock on people with disabilities. So on the ARC's webpage, on our action center, under our policy and advocacy tab, you will see an action alert. You can go right through there and send a message directly to your senators. And then the other thing is to contact both your representatives and your 2 senators, Senators Brown and Portman, to tell them to fully fund IDEA. There are 3 bills right now that all 3 kind of address different pieces of fully funding IDEA. Sending an email, a tweet, about supporting fully funding IDEA. I actually pulled some stats on Ohio's IDEA funding. And so, right, the federal government, when they passed this bill, they promised that they were going to reimburse states 40% of the cost of educating students with disabilities. Right now, we hover between like 13 and 14.5%, kind of depending on how much money is allocated each year. So that's less than half of what was promised over 30 years ago. So for the 2020-21 school year, Ohio received $474 million for special education funding. The actual amount, this kind of fully funded amount, is $1.2 billion. So Ohio is losing out on nearly $800 million by IDEA not being fully funded. So imagine what we could do in education for students with disabilities if we had that extra almost $800 million. So it is really, really important that we, secure as much funding for IDEA as we possibly can.
Yes.
Can you give our families just a quick kind of overview rundown? And when you say IDEA, where does that go to? What is that for?
Yeah, absolutely. So IDEA stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so this is the biggest kind of pot of funding that the federal government gives to states in order to do a whole bunch of things across the spectrum of education. So there is money that kind of the biggest piece is what I think most people traditionally think of, right? Which is K-12 money to states, right? So this helps fund special education teachers. This helps fund occupational therapists, speech and language therapists, physical therapists. Then we also have some pots of funding that are specifically for preschool students with disabilities. And there's a pot of funding that is specifically for early intervention. So this is for birth through 3 years old. So that helps support and fund, these early intervention programs that are helping children with disabilities and developmental delays, at their earliest stages of life. So really, this is from birth through 12th grade that this pot of funding is helping states to support. And whatever is not funded by the federal government, state governments have to make up, right? You can't just not fund the education for students with disabilities. So state budgets are really on the line to make up that difference when the federal government doesn't fulfill their promise to fund at 40%.
And what this also does is it means that when states have to make up that difference, there's not any fiscal room for any kind of growth or improvements.
Yeah, exactly, right? State governments can't run at a deficit the way that the federal government can. So there's got to be, you've got to cut from other places in order to fund. And so, especially when we're thinking about, how are we recovering from COVID and talking about learning loss, especially for students with disabilities who are hit so hard by the pandemic, right? It's hard to find that extra money when we are not fully funding the base level of things.
Right. Yeah. So we hear from many families who say, my school system needs to do more to help, my child, but they just can't. There's no way. So this is a good opportunity. If you're listening to this podcast and you feel like you fall into that category, help Robyn, help the Arc of the United States, help the Arc of Ohio, help us, help you. And help your child to be able to get fully funded, and it could make a huge difference for sure. Awesome. Well, Robyn, we thank you for coming on board our
thank
podcast
you so
today.
much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we've had this date just circled with so many different markers, and
there may or may not have been glitter involved.
Right.
We love glitter.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we woke up today and we had like jazz hands, like, oh, it's Robyn on the podcast day.
I was very much Anna from Frozen, where like I kind of woke up to my husband's alarm and I was like, oh, it's podcast day.
Yeah.
It's inauguration day.
It is. That's exactly how it was.
Right.
This
Wonderful.
is great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. And anything we can do, we're certainly here to help. We appreciate all that you are doing for not only families in Ohio, but across the country. It's certainly appreciated.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our Ohio chapter and, really all of our state and local chapters that are the reason that we can do the work that we do.